Well, everybody get a big round of applause again to this incredible panel. I love those skateboards, and Joao, you're a hero. Thank you for making us breathe and recharge ourselves in this incredible day here at this stream hangout. And I'm speaking so fast because we have a woman that has so much energy that she's a trailblazer. I'm sure you have seen her around. A troublemaker, but a game changer itself. I invite everybody out there, stop eating, stop drinking, drop everything you're doing. Just come. 3, 2, 1, 5. I have a present for you. Kiss in the mouth with tongue. Come on. And Vanessa too. Come on, everybody here. Let's give it a warm welcome. Everybody, Saja, sit down. Fast. Help me. Mom, Paul. Everybody, the day is almost over. I hope you're getting all the good practices, the energy, and the inspiration and motivation that we can make a positive change in this world. It is possible. There are no impossibles. And this woman, it is the epitome of that everything is possible. Plus, she's so chic and fabulous. And I just want to know more about her. I don't know about you, but come on, join me in giving a warm welcome to the one and only Mrs. Sutherland. Sean, welcome to the stage. Kill it.
What a build-up. Oh my God, I've got to deliver now. What a thing to follow. Vanessa, thank you for the graveyard slot. But I am going to do whatever I can because it is movie night tonight. So hang around and make sure you keep your seat for movie night. And that means you have to sit through me first. I've got a bit to cover. So I'm going to move at pace. And I'm going to talk about these 6 words. And I'm going to use, part of it I'm going to use through the plastic lens, but I hope by the end of this you will realize that plastic is the epitome of how everything in our world is connected. And I've really enjoyed hearing that last panel. And the panel before, where we were talking about vulnerability, and we were talking about mental health. And the connection of this, because fundamentally I also work in the area of mental health research, because I'm very convinced we are not going to fix the problems of the world, definitely not the plastic crisis, the climate crisis, unless we fix this. Because the mental health crisis is happening at the same time as the climate crisis for a reason. This is no coincidence. So I'm going to talk about truth. I'm going to talk about the consequence. Where we are, and the risk of this. Whose responsibility is it? I'm going to talk about opportunity, because I am an entrepreneur. I'm a very unlikely eco-warrior. I'm a massive plastic sinner. If you Google me, you will find out why. But I have to talk about hope, because as an entrepreneur, if you don't have hope, you give up. Because entrepreneurs, I think, are the most creative people in the world. You have to make shit happen out of nothing. So you have to have hope every single day, otherwise we're just going to give up. And then I want to touch on legacy, because this event really is all about legacy. It's something that all of us, I think, are motivated by. I first want to start by pulling right out. Just so you know, Mike, my fonts have gone really mad on this deck, so it's not going to look as good as you're expecting. I want us to look at the universe. We're so focused on the planet. How are we going to protect our planet? How are we going to protect ourselves? And I don't know if anybody has been looking at some of the footage that is coming out of, some of the shots coming out of the James Webb telescope. Has anybody seen it? If not, please Google it. And you can see some of these extraordinary images. And what I'm showing right here, these are called the Pillars of Hercules. This is where stars are born. And not only does this give us this scale for us to fully appreciate how tiny we are in this huge universe, and also perhaps to question, do we really believe that we are the only form of life on planet Earth? What else can be out there? So it gives us this opportunity to see the scale of it, but then it also gives us the opportunity to look at this beautiful little pearl that hangs in this black, inky darkness of planet Earth. And I think it really makes us realize how rare planet Earth is, how special it is, how we really do have heaven already on Earth. And how do we treat it? Because we know now that our beautiful blue and green pearl is in severe danger. We know that our house is on fire. In 2022, we had 7 once in a 1,000-year extreme weather events. In 2023, we had 10. That gives you an idea of how fast things are happening now, how quickly we're seeing the change. And what does this mean? And so often, funny, I was talking yesterday to some people about, for me, the biggest communications fail in the history of marketing has to be us talking about 1.5 degrees. Nobody has a clue what that means. We don't know what the impact might be. It sounds quite nice, particularly if you come from the UK. We'd love to have 1.5 more degrees up there. But the reality is that 1.5 degrees, this is what we're going to see. Already, we've lost 90% of the large fish of the ocean, never to be replaced, 90%. In 50 years, in Europe, so not some far-flung countries, but in Europe, we have lost 80% of winged insects. In the last 70 years, we have lost the very foundation of the food chain, Arctic krill, 50%, never to be returned, and phytoplankton. And if anybody knows a little bit about the oceans, you'll know that the phytoplankton create the biggest carbon sink that the ocean is, with this every 24 hours, this mass migration, taking the carbon from above the ocean down and embedded it into the deep ocean floor. And the scientists reckon by 2047, it's job done. We have succeeded in destroying the ocean, the lungs of the planet, without which there would be no life. So it's easy for us to look at that and think, well, it all sounds pretty horrifying, but what is it actually going to mean to us? And I'm going to quickly whiz through. It's going to mean these things. Number 1 is mass migration. We have no idea. In the UK, we talk about stop the boats, smash the gangs. I don't know if you've had that kind of rhetoric here in Lisbon, in Portugal, but we are very worried about people coming to our shores. Trust me, we ain't seen nothing yet. 2 billion people are going to be on the move. 2 billion people. And what right do we have in the northern hemisphere, where we have slightly cooler climate, to not allow these 2 billion people to come to our shores? So instead of thinking, how do we stop them coming? Do we build walls? What do we do? Do we ship them back to Rwanda and places like that? Instead of that, maybe we should be thinking, how do we help them? How do we help them come? Because it is our fault that they are on the move, that their lands are unlivable. Where we get our food from, our ingredients, not just the things that we eat and drink, but how we make stuff. Where do we think this comes from? Largely, it does come from the global south. So we have to be aware that there is going to be this mass weaponization of food, the securitization of water. And our very infrastructure, here we are in Lisbon, very, very much on the coast. It's the same with London. This is New York. This is that yellow line shows us where they believe the waters will rise in New York. So our very infrastructure is not built for the changes that we're seeing now, and it's happening very fast. So then we look at whose responsibility is it? Is it yours? Is it our governments? Is it industry? Is it the next generation? Is it this wonderful young guy sitting in front of me here who is doing everything that he possibly can? Is it his problem to inherit? And then you look at all of these. That orange line is obviously the increase every single year of greenhouse gas emissions. And those little black arrows are every single one of our COPs, our UNGAs, UN General Assemblies, our Davoses, all those global convenings with the great and the good, and industry and governments get together and they pat themselves on the back and say, oh yeah, when I was at the World Economic Forum. And I go to those things and I see them all, and it's overrun with lobbyists and big business. And those arrows show you they've had zero impact, not a drop of impact. So who is going to fix this? And I hate to tell you, but it's going to be us. The job is going to be down to us. It is going to be down to you. So we know that the future has never been more predictable. We know that we're going to have more climate devastation. We hope we'll have less fossil fuel dependency. We know we're going to have fewer ecological resources. So our message to industry, when we talk to industry, is always this. How can you afford? Now we know. Please stop saying, but we don't really know what the future's going to hold. We do know. The scientists have told us time and time again. So how can we afford not to be ready for this very predictable future? So here's me, serial entrepreneur, very unlikely eco-warrior, now obsessed by plastic. And it's very easy to think, why plastic? Surely we should be focused on carbon. The world is obsessed by carbon, counting carbon, offsetting carbon, carbon credits, all of those things. But the reason I'm obsessed by plastic is it's physical, it's tangible, it's everywhere, it's our fault. There are no plastic deniers out there. It's something we all feel a little bit guilty of. I even feel guilty about having this reusable plastic cup. It's the only thing I could find. But we feel a little bit guilty about plastic every single day. And I truly believe that it's the gateway to everything. Because, of course, plastic is solid climate crisis. Of course, 99% of all plastic is made out of fossil fuels. If we wean ourselves off fossil fuels, as we know we must, then of course we also have to wean ourselves off what is cited at the moment to be Plan B, the soft landing for the fossil fuel industry. So we see it as this canary in the coal mine. It's the warning symbol that has been given to us so clearly in such a guilt-inducing way that we have gone down the wrong road with everything that we make. Because it really is everything. It's in the walls here, it's our carpet, it's my clicker, it's most of our clothing. 70% of all our clothing is now made out of fossil fuel plastic. Fast fashion could not exist without plastic. We talk a lot about the oceans. We feel so guilty about what we have done to the oceans. We're so emotionally connected to our oceans. But nobody really is talking about the amount of plastic in our soils. How do we think the plastic gets into the oceans? It isn't people, it's not marine litter, people dropping it accidentally over a boat side. It is the fact that it's in our very waterways. There is plastic in the air. Plastic is so omnipresent in our lives, in the deep ice of the Antarctic, 6 miles deep in the Mariana Trench. And of course, it is in this fundament of life, which is our soil, where we grow our food, the building blocks for our children, where we grow our clothes. There is up to 23 times as much plastic in our soil as there is in our oceans. I'm not even going to talk about recycling, because it is the biggest chimera, the biggest bullshit lie that we have been fed for decades. This little placebo pill. The little, I don't even want to give it credit to even talk about it. It is a placebo pill that has enabled us to look at the wrong end of the pipe. The panel before, we're talking about it as well. We have to turn off the tap. This is nothing to do with the fact that we can occasionally, 9% of all plastic ever made has been recycled once, rarely twice. The US, in fact, the stat this year is less than 5% is recycled in the US. In the UK, we recycle less than 9% of our plastic. We export 60% of our plastic waste. The US, it's the worst of waste imperialism, isn't it? That we're just sending it abroad for our recycling on our little bags, tied up neatly. We put them outside, and they're being burnt on the roadsides of Turkish villages. So the whole myth of recycling is probably the hardest thing that I'm up against. Because to get people to understand it's almost better to not recycle it is the hardest thing that you can do. And then we get on to carbon. And often I will get that pushback from industry, yeah, but plastic's so light. And because it's so light, it's lowering carbon to transport. But I've never seen any kind of analysis of the carbon footprint of plastic that has any kind of metric for the fact, number one, it comes out of an oil rig, the toxicity created there. And number two, the fact that it never goes away. So the impact, what kind of metric do we put on the devastation to the ocean? To the fact that in every lungful of air that you breathe, you're breathing in plastic. So even the industry itself is the fifth biggest, as a country, the fifth biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, and it is set to treble. So if we are not noisy about plastic, if we don't demand more action from our governments in this, then it will treble, because it is plan B for the fossil fuel industry. And because it's everywhere, because it's so omnipresent in our lives, because there are many people in this audience here who have never known life without plastic, we believe that it's an element in itself. It's like a material that exists, that it's almost born as plastic. But it isn't. It is not like aluminium or copper or cobalt or any of the things that you will find from your chemistry class on the periodic table. Plastic is simply a mixture of chemicals. Fossil fuel polymers then made into something useful with chemicals. Some plastics, 70% of the weight of that plastic is chemicals alone. It's not the fossil fuel long-chain polymers, it's chemicals. We use 16,000 chemicals to make our plastic. 6% of them are globally regulated. For some reason, well, I think we know why, but this is a material that has escaped for 100 years any kind of global regulation. 4,000 of those chemicals, of the 16,000, have been tested for impact on human health, and almost all are considered hazardous. So we now know way too much. When people say to you, yeah, but we don't really know the impact on human health, do we, of this credit card of plastic that we breathe in and consume every week? We don't really know, but we do know. But every time one of these science reports comes out, it's like whack-a-mole, a bop, 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 knocking it back down so that it doesn't have the impact. Because we, of course, any of these scientists are up against the most powerful lobbying organization in the world, the fossil fuel industry. And even if we did double our recycling rate from 9% globally to 18%, the other reason that we shouldn't recycle is because of those chemicals. Because those chemicals don't disappear when we recycle them. In fact, they compound up. And as they compound up, we lose all possible trace of responsibility for what is in there. There is no traceability. So every time we recycle plastic, think about those chemicals compounding up. Some of you might be aware that we are currently negotiating, all 180 plus member countries are negotiating a global plastics treaty. A little bit like the Paris Agreement from 2015, but this is happening in record time. In only 2 years, they're trying to put this treaty to bed. There is one more negotiating session that is happening in Busan in South Korea in November. I'm sad to tell you, it is off the rails already. Already, there is no discussion about a cap on plastic. There is very little reference to the impact on human health. And all we're really talking about with these 180 countries is recycling. And the reason for that is that these governments, these delegates, these negotiators are so influenced by the fossil fuel lobbyists. 193 fossil fuel lobbyists were in the last negotiating chamber in Ottawa. And I sat there and I witnessed this happening, of how extraordinary it is that we can allow our democracy to be so overrun by people that do not have humanity's health, humanity's existence really at heart. So one of the things we did is to ensure that the health scientists were really listened to. We created a number of events, and we got them together, and they wrote their own treaty, the Health Scientists Global Plastic Treaty, that if you really want to listen to what the health scientists want, if you want to know the clauses that they want to have in the treaty, then here they are. And if none of that mattered, and we didn't worry about human health, and we didn't worry about the turtle with a straw up its nose, and the devastation that we cause the soil and the air, and of course our oceans, the other reason that I am so obsessed by plastic is, I think it is the enabler of our hyper-consumptive lifestyle. And as I mentioned, fast fashion could not exist without fossil fuel plastic. The invention of this material broke our system of take, make, repair, renew, share, rent, all of those things, to take, make, chuck it in a bin, for this imaginary recycling fairy to do something with. So if we look at the climate crisis and those coal-fired factories in China that have been built to make more and more and more stuff. The reason that this has happened is because of the invention of plastic. There is not enough natural resource in the world for us to consume in the way that we are currently consuming. And of course, plastic doesn't fit into these circular models that we talk about all the time. We constantly talk about the circular economy. How can we make plastic fit into that? And it will never fit. And I quickly want to give you an example of why. So has anybody seen this illustration before? No. Wow, I'm amazed at that. Because I'm about to debunk it. So we're currently in the linear economy, where we take something, we make it, we waste it. We're trying to get to this recycling economy, where we try and fit things, and of course, many things can be recycled. Paper, glass, metal, all of those things, it's great. And then we talk about this new thing that we're all trying to aim for, which is the circular economy. But the problem with this illustration, that it's been around for a few years, of everyone saying this is the way we have to go, is there's still a bin. And when we consume as much as we consume and make as much as we make, that bin is going to be full of a lot of stuff. And the reason for that is that we make stuff, we take from nature, and we make stuff, but then we add toxins to it. We add chemicals to it. We fundamentally break the backbone of what was a nutrient to make it a toxin. And nature is completely binary. There is no less bad for nature. What we give to nature is either a nutrient or it's a poison. And there is no kind of gray area in the middle where we think, oh, maybe a bioplastic, it's better than a regular plastic. No, there is no gray area. It's a nutrient or a poison. It's that simple. So if we make leather, for example, and we take skin, the most natural thing designed to go back to nature as a nutrient for the next stage of growth, the problem is that we then toxify it with our chromium, our heavy metals, and the dyes, and all of those things. If anybody wants to see more, there's an amazing documentary called Slay, S-L-A-Y, that explains what we do to leather, this natural material. So when it goes back to nature, it goes back as toxic waste. But imagine if our circle was something different. Imagine if instead we borrowed from nature. We didn't take and toxify, but we borrowed nutrients. We baked them, we molded them, we shaped them into something that's useful for us, but we fundamentally kept them in their nutrient-safe state so that they can go back to nature as nutrients. Because the only circular economy that we should ever aspire to is nature. There is no waste in nature. The only species on the planet that makes waste is, of course, us. And the other thing we need to look at is how much resource we take. Because at the moment, we have taken resources from our children's future with the fact that we, of course, Earth Overshoot Day is getting nearer every single day. We're taking those resources, we're creating this waste, this 8.7 billion tons of waste, 16 times the weight of all humans. And we really need to look at this and think, how can we be taking these resources from the future of our children, the 1.7 planets worth of resource that we take every single year, and create all this waste, and then think, how many bins do we need in our kitchen? How, should we be putting it in organic and non-organic, or should there be a metal bin and a glass bin? When the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why is there a bin at all? Why do we think having waste is normal? It's extraordinary to me how we have fundamentally normalized waste. So one of the things that we like to do is, instead of thinking about the plastic crisis as a crisis, maybe we could flip it on its head. And maybe we could think about it as a gift. That little tap on the shoulder to say, hey, humanity, you've gone down the wrong road here. You've gone down this toxic cul-de-sac using this material. And maybe we could treat this as this bedoof to wake us all up, to not just imagining different materials, but to also imagine completely different systems of how we live, where we don't take 1.7 planets worth of resource every single year, that we embrace new systems, a different way of living. And that's why I think plastic is the gateway, because it is that defibrillator moment that is undeniable to all of us for us to rethink everything. And this is where we come on to opportunity and hope. Because what I find is when you look at the materials of the future and you think about how we could live, it could be so much better, such an extraordinary different lifestyle, fairer, cleaner, so much better for all of us. So 8 years ago, when I found out, I was asked to advise the Hong Kong board who are making a documentary called A Plastic Ocean. And as somebody who was a co-founder and running a skincare brand at the time, you can imagine how many plastic bottles I had personally pumped out into the environment. Didn't even really think about it. Wasn't on my list, which is a shocking thing to tell you now, but 10 years is a long time in plastic awareness. And when I found out from the marine biologists and the health scientists what we are doing every single day with our addiction to plastic, I couldn't leave it alone. And so I co-founded this organization, which is pro-business, pro-solution, because obviously I believe very powerfully in the power of business for good, with this very simple goal: nothing to do with beach cleans, nothing to do with recycling, nothing to do with that end of the pipe, but just focused on igniting and inspiring the world to turn off the plastic tap. And as an entrepreneur, you'll not be surprised to hear that what I look for is where's the opportunity here? Because where there is change, there is always a massive opportunity. And one of the things that we noticed in working with industry over the last 8 years is that there is this enormous group of people, the young creative, the old creative as well, but this enormous creative audience, because of course everything is designed. But imagine if we could inspire 160 million global creatives, the engineers, the architects, the textile designers, obviously the packaging designers, the product designers. Imagine if we could ignite, empower, educate, inspire them to think differently from the very beginning. Then how could they create a vision of a very different future so there is no waste? So last year, we launched Plastic Free, which is the first global solutions platform to talk about systems change as well as material change, but to connect those 160 million global creatives with all these answers of the future that are available at scale today. Because this future is happening now. It is not 2030, it's not 2040, it's happening today. Already we can see what's happening with our mobility. This is a car. It's a little shot of a car designed by Thomas Heatherwick. I don't know if any of you know him, but an amazing designer. And this is going to be the car that is available for the masses in China. Super cheap. Let's hope it comes to Europe as well. But I just love the way that they've made this car. And of course, it's not even covered in plastic paint. We know that we're going to buy differently. And here we've got great examples at Extreme Hangout of people buying vintage clothing, personalizing their clothing, having more individuality about what they wear. So the way that we sell things is going to change very radically. We know our food systems are changing. You know, somebody was talking earlier, and it was fantastic guy about crickets. And we were looking at the calorific input and output of a cow. How ridiculous is that metric? So we know that we have to eat in a different way. So all these things are starting to happen at such speed now. Anyone who knows about donut economics, I'm a massive fan of Kate Raworth, where we talk about thriving rather than GDP being the only metric of success. How can we live in harmony on this donut of societal constraints and planetary constraints in a way where it's fair for everybody? Unfortunately, I think our metrics are changing, and people are starting to recognize that profit cannot be the only metric that matters. Growth cannot be the only metric that matters on a planet that is, of course, finite. And we're about to embark on this extraordinary explosion of course, AI and biotech-enabled material revolution. And yesterday I was talking about a book that I read recently. If anybody has read The Coming Wave by Sutherland, part of that book, he is the co-founder of DeepMind, which is one of the most successful AI companies. But the middle part of the book, he starts to talk about, we all know we're all going to have personal assistants very quickly and all of this stuff, and probably we're going to have digital girlfriends and boyfriends, and all of that is going to happen. But the second half of the book talks about what's going to happen in the next half of this century. And that's where it gets super exciting of how the materials that we make, we will be able to manipulate at an atomic level to make our materials. This, I don't know if you can see this down here, but they reckon that by 2049, which is feeling kind of tangible now, artificial intelligence will be 1 billion times more intelligent than humanity. And to give that the analogy, it is a fly to Einstein. So unfortunately, we're going to be the fly. And of course, our business models are changing. The rise of the B Corp, all of these things. And they need to change much faster because there is going to be a lot of future dinosaurs, particularly when we see what will happen with climate. This is a project that we did with Unilever, which is a refillable deodorant. It launched in the US. Everything that you see there is this stainless steel deopod, because they recognized how mad that every single month you finish your deodorant, you throw away this lump of plastic. Why do we do that? When actually what you could do is simply replace the bit you've actually consumed, your deodorant. So this is a project that they did with their biggest brand, which is Dove. And hopefully this whole thing of renewables and returnables is something that we will see in the future. Because single use is the problem. Single use is why we use so much more resource than we're entitled to, and why we create so much waste. So another project we're involved in is something called Reposit. And I particularly love this, because when you hear it, it makes so much sense. This is how we shop today. This is when you pop into a Douglas or a Walmart or wherever you guys shop today, aisle after aisle of colored plastic, never to be recycled, shedding microplastics and chemicals every single minute of its life. Imagine if those brands could get together and use standardized packaging across competitive brands and retailers, and instead, it could simply look like this. Because that, to me, doesn't look like a massive stretch. And imagine if those aluminium bottles didn't go into a recycling system, but instead, they were collected. You were given some kind of reward as the consumer, but they were collected, they were washed, and they were returned. Why do we think everything has to be used once and go into any kind of recycling system? So Reposit is this collaborative, returnable, standardized packaging platform that works for all those competitive brands and retailers to create that system. So it's really just packaging as a service, because when you buy any product, the madness is you're paying 60% of the price for a piece of packaging that you don't even want, that you then chuck in a bin, and you are complicit in the problem of what happens to that piece of packaging. But imagine a story where that packaging simply goes into a returnable bin and nobody is complicit, and it's used many, many times. This is the world's first completely nutrient-based sneaker. We make 25 billion pairs of sneakers. So that's 50 billion sneakers every single year. All of them are largely made out of plastic, particularly things like the PU base. None of them are ever going to be recycled. Nobody's interested in recycling sneakers. The problem is now people talk about compostable sneakers. No composting industry is waiting to get a bucket full of some of those 25 billion pairs of sneakers. They don't want them in our soil. We shouldn't either. But this is something different, because this is made out of nutrients. Every single part of this sneaker, you can chop it up and you could eat it. It wouldn't be tasty, but you could. And this is made by the ex-creative officer of Adidas. And Adidas, you will know, were the brand that brought out the ocean plastic shoe. And he decided, I can't be part of this anymore, this kind of bullshit of recycling ocean plastic. We have to do something different. So he worked with this incredible organization in the US who make nutrient-based materials. That company is actually going to be making the interior of every single new electric BMW car going forward, making it out of nutrients. So this, for me, is where opportunity is starting to happen. And it's happening at scale, and it's happening at speed. And of course we need to move the money. Of course we need to move investment. Can you imagine how many trillions of dollars have gone into making plastic so amazing? And we worry about these tiny little startups in seaweed and algae, and how do they raise $3 million on their next round? I mean, it's unbelievably hard as an alternative materials company. This is an entire clothing collection made out of brewed protein. So it's amazing to me to see how we can now start to make these things in a lab. I love this particular brand, which is a very high-end skincare brand. And instead of shipping you a plastic bottle, even a glass bottle, that is mostly water, as all skincare and all personal care is, 95% of it is water, they're just giving you the bit that you actually need. So all of those SkinCeuticals are crammed into that little capsule, and then you simply add water when you need it. So I love all these systems that are adding up to this whole new way of living. And as I said, this is not about some distant future. This is happening today, but we have to move faster. And we are still in the world of theory. We're still in the world of plastic pledges and pacts. Scary fact to me, 3 years ago, they'd run a report to look at if every single plastic commitment from every global business and every global government were to be successful, it would reduce the flow of plastic pollution into the ocean by 7%. And none of them are on track. So we've got to move faster, and we have to stop all these reports and the calculations. We have to move to solutions now. When I was 7 years old, I had a book. And this book was just my absolute dream book. It was called The Book of Tomorrow. And I used to pore over the pages of this book, and it had stuff like that I could never imagine. We didn't have a TV at home when I was 7 years old, but they had flat screen TVs. It was like Star Trek to me. They had little jets and bubbles floating around the air with little cars with people in. I used to go to bed at night. I couldn't wait to get to the future. It was so exciting for me. It was bright and positive and optimistic. It was exciting. I have 2 sons. They don't have that view of the future. They have a very different view of the future. They have climate stress. They worry about what their future will be. My 30-year-old son actually said to me the other day, I don't even think we should have kids, which is a horrifying thought, that we have created a world that our young are thinking that they can't even extend the human race because of what we have done. And I feel such a responsibility that we are the generation, I am the generation that made this mess. And I have to be part of the generation that tries to fix it. Because we think the future is inevitable. We think it's just all there and it's going to unravel whatever we do. It is absolutely created by us. We made the present. We made the future that we live in today. We can make a different future tomorrow. But it is going to take all of us. And it's largely going to take the creative audience. Because anybody who is out there in the world of creativity, we need you now, like we have never needed you before. Because it is only the radical creatives, the engineers, the architects, these people that can create a picture of a different future for us, that we can then build a roadmap to that future. Because without that, we will fail, because our future is currently looking so dismal. But it has always been this way. I don't know if anyone can name an economist or a banker that has changed the way that we live. I can't think of one. But it has always been the radical creatives, and we need them now. And we need business to step up, because governments are failing us. The UN, never going to happen. Governments, I'm sorry, they are absolutely in the pocket of business. So we need business to be the tool of change now. And when people say to me, so what can we do about plastic? Sean, I take my reusable cup. I never use a single-use bag. I said, that's really great. And of course, we have a personal level of responsibility, but that's not going to fix it. This is not about straws. It's not just about bags. This is about what you do at work. Your power is what you do at work. So I urge all of you to be that squeaky wheel at work, to talk about these things, to address the issue of plastic within your workplace. Because even though you may think that you don't use plastic, you may be part of a technology company, it is everywhere within our business, and we need to recognize it, and we need to see what we can do. Because everyone in this room can be this wrecking ball of change. Because if we're not doing this today, what is our legacy? What are we doing every day if we're simply squeezing every last drop of profit out of the status quo? This image is a 2017 clip from Facebook. And the line under it said, our members like to finish their round. And we can look at that and think, oh my God, how ridiculous. With that fire raging, that people are still just thinking, we'll finish our round. I don't know if anybody saw the Greek island 2 years ago, the fires in Evia, and there was the windsurfers, and they were, with the fire raging behind, you just think, wow, we are such a strange species. We're so in denial. And much as we may laugh at this, I have to challenge all of us. Are we all part of this? Are we all actually just playing golf in Oregon? Or are we doing something about it? Because this is now about our legacy. It is about what we do when we get up every single day, thinking about not just the living, not just our next generation, not my sons and hopefully my sons' children. What we do in the next 5 years is going to impact the trillions of people to come ahead of us, we hope. So when we think about legacy, we have a completely different perspective now to the legacy that perhaps our forebears had. So be that squeaky wheel. Do whatever you can. Be vocal about it. And I thank you for your time. Thank you. Yeah, only... Hey, if anyone's got a question, I'd love it. Oh, great.
Hi, first of all, thank you. This was really enlightening for me.
Where are you?
Sorry, here.
Oh, there. Hi.
I have so much things about. I actually have a question.
I loved your panel as well, by the way. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I have 2 questions to 2 points that you mentioned. One is about reposit,
Yeah.
and the other one lobbying, the plastic
Yes.
lobbying party. So for both, reposit, I listened a little bit. The brands that you mentioned are German. Me growing up in Germany, we grow up with this recycling, we have to be the forefront, etc.
Yeah.
But what I see now is, for example, that a lot of the Germans are tired of it. They're like, why are we the ones having to do this? We are always on the forefront. They're coming then to the lobbying, because it is the lobbying party in Germany is quite strong. Now, my question is, what are you, or what can we do to maybe build a similar lobbying party that does exactly the opposite? Because I've been trying, but it's a wall. Let's put it like this. So I'm very interested in what you are doing on your side, how people can help with that actual lobbying in the background, with governments, with brands, etc.
Great. Late last year, you probably know we just had an election in the UK. So we spoke at the Labour Party conference last year, and we presented a blueprint for a thriving post-plastic economy with an entire roadmap of a 10-year plan of exactly what Labour could do, using existing legislation, because often it's very hard to introduce new legislation, as you will know, but using existing legislation, how they could go through a series of different initiatives, picking off some of the major culprits in plastic and banning them. Because much as we want to live in a libertarian society and we don't want our governments banning things, you have to give business certainty. And banning gives business certainty. Obviously, in the EU, we have now followed you in the UK, and we banned plastic, disposable plastic cutlery. Try and find a plastic fork in London today. You won't find one. because we banned it and industry innovated. But we have to have new laws and bans to give business certainty, to create the vacuum that innovation can then flourish. Because otherwise, we work with a lot of the big business. It is too hard to change. Voluntary doesn't work. And that's why the Unilevers of the world have already announced they're not going to hit their plastic commitments in 2025. And it's kind of, oh yeah, sorry guys, by the way, we're going to miss them by a mile. And there is no comeback because they were voluntary. So we have to use policy, we have to use laws. So my message to anybody here is policy is very important. And if we vote, we live in democracies, you need to get involved. So you need to use your votes really wisely, but also be vocal. Like, I never knew, I'm nothing to do with politics, I'm an entrepreneur. I didn't even know that you could turn up at a party conference and you could get a platform and you could speak. I didn't know that I could go and meet with MPs. I do that all the time now because they know so little, I can't tell you. And I'm really interested in what's happening in Germany, actually, because Germany, when you talk about Reposit, the beer bottle system, the water bottle system, you have the most brilliant returnable schemes. Every beer brand in Germany uses the same bottle. It works.
Wait, start again.
Everybody heard me, I think. So when we give it back, we get money, let's say 30 cents for each bottle can that we give. But still, and people do it. Here, when I arrived in Portugal, I was like collecting these bottles, trying to give it in a supermarket, and they looked at me like, what is this? But the people, that's what I mean. The marketing around it is just wrong or non-existent. So instead of people actually being proud that they're doing this and seeing they're doing something well, everybody's just fed up. And that's my point where I'm like, why is it marketed so wrong? Why are we not doing enough in that way? And exactly, Germany is going back now. They're discussing now to bring plastic straws back. So that's the thing that I was saying. Even the countries that went to the front, the Green Party in Germany lost now. So it's going steps back instead of to the front.
Yeah, it's definitely going backwards. You're so right. And I can feel it as well, that there's a pushback. It's called the green lash. Is definitely happening, and people are now, they don't really want to talk about ESG anymore. It's like, it's really interesting how this is happening so fast, and it's definitely happening in the world of plastic, where people think, well, haven't we fixed this already? But you mentioned things like straws. I had the best example of the ingenuity of mankind. I was in Greece recently. I ordered a drink. He gave me this plastic wrapped straw. I unwrapped the straw. It was a plastic straw. And I said, oh, I thought these were banned. And he said, no, it's a reusable straw. And I said, oh, how does that work? So you take it back, do you wash it and put it back in a plastic sleeve and then give it to the next person? He said, no, it's yours now. He said, here, it's on the bill. I said, oh my God, that's incredible how man works, So then I've now got this straw. This is apparent, I know. Isn't that bonkers? So we find these loopholes because we just love convenience so much. And one of the things about Reposit that excites me, because in Germany, and a lot of people are very good, and they carry their stuff and they put it in all of those machines to get your 30 cents back. Why isn't there a bin in your kitchen called returnables? A smart bin, asset tracking, everything to you to make sure you get rewarded. We have the technology. We just need to have to do it. At the moment, they're coming to your house, they're collecting your waste. Why aren't they collecting your returnables? So all of these systems could be created. There is no new systems that need to be created. What we have is a communications problem. And that's where all of us need to be very vocal to say, we want it to be different. Thanks for your question, though.
Thank you so much for the great talk. I don't have the sources of what I'm going to comment on, but I would love to know your take on it. So regarding single-usage plastic bags and the ones that you buy at the supermarket now, the number I heard is that you have to use the durable bags 100 times so that it justifies in terms of the climate impact. And the other thing, in terms of the ban, and I wonder how we balance this, is like, for instance, if you ban the straws, you go into bamboo straws, or maybe no straws is, I think, is the best solution, but people replace with like bamboo straws. The problem is that once you have to produce the bamboo, you have to grow it, and you're going to kill, because you have to do it so intensively, so quickly, the impact in terms of deforestation and so on can actually be very negative as well. So how do you balance these two effects?
You raise a really great point about replacement materials. And I love your thing of, no straw. It's like, there is a reason God gave us lips. Like, what is with the obsession with the straw? It's so bizarre that every drink has to come with a straw. So the other problem for me is that we are so mono about our metrics. So when you say it, perhaps like the bag thing, do you mean like a cotton or a hemp bag? Or do you mean the thicker plastic bag as a bag for life? The thicker one. Okay, great. So, because often the metrics on, you need to use a paper bag so many more times because of the lightness of the plastic bag, and all of that, those life cycle analysis are absolute bullshit. But the one about the bag for life is a really great question. In the UK, we put a tax. I know you've done it in Europe as well. We put a tax of 5p, 10p now on the single-use carrier bag. We had massive headlines, Daily Mail everywhere. 90% reduction in the number of bags. What a win. Look at us, ban the bag. Look what we have done. What we forgot to measure was the amount of plastic that we use in all the bags for life. We use more plastic in the UK now than we ever used for all those trillions of single-use plastic bags. And yet again, we use these metrics to fool ourselves. Yeah, and we pay for it. Yeah, on average, every UK household has 57 bags for life. That system isn't working, because every time we go to the supermarket, you think, okay, I'll pay 10p for the flimsy one, but I feel better about paying 20p for the bag for life. So we've got millions of them stuffed under the sink. If a bag was truly for life, then Henry VIII's bags would be used by King Charles now. That gives you an idea. They'd be stashed under the sink in Windsor Castle. And he'd still be using them, because that's the lifetime of plastic. So a bag for life is just a bit of a nonsense. It's yet another way to sell us more plastic.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. Halfway, I lost it a little bit. In my mind, I love Coca-Cola as a product. So somebody is going to produce Coca-Cola for me, and they happen to have a bottle around it. That's not mine. Why should I be responsible and try to recycle or find other solutions while it's not mine? It's not my problem, and Coca-Cola has the biggest influence and money to actually change it. So why do you give the keynote to us instead of to them? Secondly, I think that behavior change takes 20 years, and we don't have 20 years anymore. So why this beautiful keynote to us and not to them?
Great. I'm so glad you brought Coca-Cola up. Because I think there are very, very few bad people in the world, apart from Coca-Cola. So, if you add up the second, third, fourth, and fifth polluter of our planet, it still doesn't equal Coca-Cola. They pump out 120 billion plastic bottles every single year. And you are right. It's not their problem, it's your problem. And they actually are on record for saying, their head of sustainability said, we don't have a packaging problem, we have a waste problem, and that's not our deal. And if only we could get the consumer to put it in the right bin. But we all know that that's never going to work, because there isn't an infrastructure for us to recycle those 120 billion plastic bottles. And if Coca-Cola actually wanted to have them back and use recycled or whatever they believe is possible, you think they wouldn't have built a system by now? Of course they would. They don't want those bottles back. It's cheaper to give you plastic polymers. So of course we talk to Coca-Cola. Of course we talk to the biggest, Unilever we work with is the third biggest polluter on the planet. So we have to speak, which is why I say business is the tool of change. I fundamentally disagree that it is your problem. It is nothing to do with you. People buy what they are sold. Industry have to sell us something different, and governments have to mandate and legislate that they do it faster. It's so simple. Why isn't it happening? Therein lies the question. Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. Shout it out.
I'm afraid we're not going to change it because the lobby industry, so let's stick to the Coca-Cola.
Yep.
Their lobby budget is a zillion times as big as ours. And once the real value of a plastic bottle for them is not interesting, they'll innovate in a second. So
Yeah.
once that's not happening, we're not going to solve the problem,
Yeah,
I think.
and I agree with you, and that's why we work with the health scientists, because I believe the Achilles heel of the Coca-Colas of the world and governments who don't legislate fast enough is human health impact. Because we don't really care about what happens to the oceans and to the planet, but we really care about our health. And we really care about the fact that why is there plastic in every single male testicle now? Why do we find this acceptable? Why is there plastic in unborn babies' brains? But why should they? Why should it be, why is it legal to sell you something that harms you? This is my fundamental of, this is why we need law. This is why it all comes back to law. We need laws that protect us. Why is it that somehow plastic for 100 years has never been globally regulated? Yeah. Oh, hello.
How long has plastic been alive for?
So it's really been around for 100 years, but it started to massively increase in using plastic for everything probably only about 30, 40 years ago. So really not very, probably as much time as your mum, say. In her life it has happened. Does anybody know why plastic was invented? What the very first plastic thing was? But, yeah, what did you just say? No, the billiard ball. The billiard balls. To stop it being ivory, they ran a competition to see...
Keyboards. I thought it was piano keyboards.
Yeah, and probably after that it would be piano keyboards. Yeah. But the billiard ball was the very first thing that was created by a scientist to replace ivory billiard balls. If only we left it at that.
I want to go back to the beginning of your presentation, where you said that we need to fix ourselves before we fix the world. And we have a global epidemic called mental health, and suicide is the second leading cause of death in teenagers between 20 and 38 in the US. How do you think we change it so people can connect with the cause, with plastic, instead of the whole mental health problem? Like, it gets getting bigger and bigger. And how do we solve it to make things better?
I think it's really well documented now that when we reconnect with nature, then we feel better about ourselves. And we have become such incredible consumers. From the minute we're born, we are bred to be a consumer now. And I think if we can step back from that and we can consume less and we can jump off, just step aside of that hyper-consumptive lifestyle, I think that's a massive motivator for helping yourself, for revaluing your connection with nature, with people, with experiences. Imagine if we spent our money less on stuff and more on being together, travel, bitter experiences, all of those things. I think the shift towards buying less, we were talking yesterday about no buy year, which is a big movement that is starting now of people saying, unless it's absolutely essential, I'm not going to buy it. And it's really hard because we now shop for a leisure activity and we think that that's normal. That isn't normal. People used to buy things because they needed things and that was it. But we would do other stuff for leisure. So I think that the key for me of the mental health crisis and the climate crisis is us recognizing that we are nature and plugging back into nature in a way that we have completely forgotten. And how wonderful for us that here we are in this park. And you can measure it, you can physically measure. If you go and put your bare feet in the soil, and you look up at the sky, and you breathe the air in, your blood pressure goes down. We live in these little concrete boxes, consuming buy now, little dopamine hit. And I find it really extraordinary how simple it could be if we just bought less stuff. But it's tough.
That's a good segue to my question, I think. On the stuff that we do buy and the nature-based ingredients, can you tell us a little bit about what they are? Like when you talk about the sneaker being made out of nutrients and stuff, what are some of the leading replacers of plastic and how do we scale those through the supply chain? As similar to maybe the plastic growth story.
So I don't think there's going to be one ingredient that replaces plastic. You know, it is an absolute miracle in material, which is why it's become the default for almost everything in our world. But I think there will be a myriad of different nutrient-based materials that we start to use. And you look at that sneaker, and that is using natural rubber, which is working direct with the community. So it's restoring the farming of natural rubber, tapping into the trees in a way that is regenerative. It's using coconut coir. It's using vegetable oils. It's using things that are readily available. And the guy that invented this huge material system, reinvention of how we make stuff, he said to me, what I realized early on is nature fixed the scale problem long ago. There is cellulose, the most abundant material on the planet. There is more cellulose in plant matter that falls to the ground every single day than decades of fossil fuel plastic. So we just need to learn how to use that. And of course, the ocean, kelp, all of these things, seaweed, learning to work with the ocean as our new farm, but we have to do it in a regenerative way. Tomorrow night there is a film, if anybody is around, which is called Deep Rising, which is about deep sea mining. And that is the opposite of what we need to do. It's like, okay, so we've extracted everything from the land. Let's see what we can do with something we know nothing about, the very ocean bed. So we've got to be really careful that everything that we do now is regenerative, that it's fast growing. And if we make something out of it, and if it is single use, and we're always going to need some single use things, molded fiber is a brilliant example of how we can take agri-waste, make something that is designed to only be used once and go back into a system. But if it escapes into the environment, then it has to be able to go back to nature safely. And that's where it all goes wrong, that we think that we can close loop things. And we can't. 2 billion people on the planet have no waste management at all. So we have to build for them. We have to build everything for them because then we know that we're building safe materials.
Hi, I have a question. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was really eye-opener because I think sometimes we need to shake things a little up because I think our memory gets a little, we need to be refreshed. I have a question. Right now, as the youth, we do advocacy campaigns, we do our podcast, we do our YouTube climate series, we are active on our social media, so we can also connect with other youth and tell them that they're not alone on this. Right now, in my group, we do policy briefs and we give them to our members of the European Parliament. We also signalize this to our members of the Portuguese Parliament. What do you think what can we do as youth to better improve this idea? Because we are doing advocacy and we are doing awareness, but we need to do more action. With our means, with our age, with our knowledge, what do you think can be the take that the youth can use to reach the other level?
Great. Personally, I think the days of advocacy are done. We have to move on. We have to move to action now. And what I would love you to do with your skill set and your network is to take the science, the global treaty written by the health scientists, take that to Brussels. Take that to the heart of European government, because the European Parliament, I have to say, the EU, everyone in the world around plastic is terrified of the EU. They're terrified of France even more, because France is so active. It's incredible what France are doing. But any group calls I'm on with people, from Coca-Cola and everybody, particularly from the US, will say to me, tell me what's happening in Europe, because we might as well do it now. So we have this incredible opportunity with the new parliament coming in, with a lot of voting happening, obviously across so much of our democracies right now. We have this moment where we can be very noisy. So if you want to take that treaty in, then I will supply the health scientists to back you up. And these are the most expert scientists with decades of research. The scientists who coined the phrase endocrine disrupting chemicals, which of course are the things in plastic that are damaging us so much, particularly fertility. So if you could do something like that, then I think that could have impact, because again, the Achilles heel will be human health, because with human health impact comes risk. And what is the most terrifying four-letter word for government? Risk. What is the most terrifying word for industry? Risk. So what we need also is the client Earths, the SEALs of the world, Center for International Environmental Law. We need those guys to create the first mass lawsuit, which will be around the impact on human health. And as soon as that happens, it's game over for plastic. And then the money will flow into innovation, because the vacuum will be created. So it could happen very, very quickly, but we've all got to be pushing at all of those levers. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your amazing questions and for so much time. I really appreciate you.